To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Hi everyone, Dr. Keith Cobern, Dr. Paul Meier, and Grant Davis join me, Kristin Walker, because I wanted to know about treatment programs like the Meier Clinics Catalyst program. As someone who works diligently on my own mental well-being and have struggled with mental illness, it was important for me and for many of our listeners that we delve into how these types of programs work, why some, like the Catalyst program, are so unbelievably effective, and share that people from all over the globe, including well-known leaders who have the same reasons we all do for not taking the time to do a 3 or 4 week program, literally drop everything and come anyway. So while Dr. Cobern, Dr. Meier, and Mr. Davis work from the Richardson, Texas Meier Clinic, I wanted to make sure that you all know that the Catalyst program is also available at their Wheaton, Illinois, and Bothell, Washington locations. You can go to www.meierclinics.com for more information. I loved this show. It answered a lot of questions for me, and I hope it answered some of the questions that we've received from you, our listening family. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, Kristin Sunanta Walker here, and we're on with a round table with Dr. Paul Meier. We have Grant Davis, who has joined us for the last few shows. Hi, Grant. Thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then, of course, Paul. Can't do the show without you. And Paul, you brought another guest on tonight, so will you go ahead and do the introduction?
Yeah, I'm really happy tonight, especially since we're going to talk about day programs, where people can get really just an amazing, like a 6 months to a year worth of therapy done in 3 weeks. And so I'm happy to have as our guest tonight, Dr. Keith Cobern. And Dr. Cobern has been with our clinic in Richardson, a suburb of Dallas, for about 78 years now, right, Keith? No,
about 78.
It's about 25, right? Is it about 25 or?
I'm in my
28
28th year now, yes.
Yeah, 28 years. And he runs the day program. So he runs it in Grant Davis, we're happy to have with us tonight too, is our nurse practitioner. And when people come to our day program, they come from all over really from other countries even. But when people come to our day program, they stay in a hotel nearby, and I see them for an hour or longer to figure out what I feel like the problem is and sort of get things kicked off, the main direction we need to go in or things like that. And then Grant Davis is our nurse practitioner, and he sees them every single day to see the ones who need medication, which most of them do to help speed up their recovery. He sees them every single day and does a little bit of brief psychotherapy with them too, but mostly to see if they're having side effects and change their meds and things like that. And then Keith Cobern is the one. He's the genius behind the whole thing. He's the one that he does some of the groups. He trains the counselors. He just guides everything there and helped create it when we created it together. And he's just an awesome therapist. And when people are there, we dig and we probe and we try to get people to spill their guts, and I tell people when they come in, I say, somebody will be crying when I'm doing the interview, they'll apologize. I said, don't apologize. We're going to try to get you to cry every day, while you're here. And we use a lot of shortcut techniques too, because I'll just give you a quick example. Then I'm gonna shut up and let these guys talk. But if somebody, for example, had been sexually abused as a child by, let's say, a parent, by her dad, then when you get therapy, if this gal got therapy now that she's 30 years old or however, she'd have to talk about that with a therapist for maybe months, but we'll
Years.
do stuff.
Yeah.
Or years. And we'll do stuff like, instead of talking about it, we'll put an empty chair in front of her, right in front of the whole group, and say, okay, pretend like your dad's sitting there in the chair and tell him how you feel about what he did. And they'll be scared to death to do it, but Keith will, he'll badger them till they do it. And when they do, they'll burst out and cry, and what happens is decasexis, we call it. The emotions come pouring out, and Keith can share. There's a lot of techniques that we use to shortcut the therapy process, and it's amazing. It's amazing what Grant does. People could come in and be manic or be even a little delusional or things like that. They're usually not. They're normal everyday people that are going through a crisis, but they could be almost anything. And he'll put them on medication and see them every day. And if somebody were out of touch with reality and thought they were Jesus and heard voices telling them they were, in about 8 days on a certain type of medicine, they'd be normal. And look back and say, I can't believe I believe that. So it's amazing what you can do with great therapy and great medication. So I'm going to shut up now. And Keith and I wrote a book together too. But
Right,
Keith he's just an awesome marriage therapist, family systems therapist, Gestalt therapist. He does it all, and he trains the other counselors so well.
I was going to say, the two of you wrote a book together called Meaning in Life, right, Keith?
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Paul was trying to get me to help him write a book for years and years, and finally talked me into it. So we did.
He has a way of doing that, doesn't he?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to say this to listeners. This idea to talk about this subject was mine. It was not Paul's or Melanie's or Grant's, and certainly not Keith, Dr. Cobern. So I wanted to talk about this because I find it fascinating. I went the long therapeutic route. And I wish I had something like this because I was the child that was sexually abused by a parent. So, and I'm 48. And so it took decades to get through a lot of stuff. Even though I started at 12, I would have, to be able to go somewhere. And I'm not saying that after 3 weeks people are cured, because it's a lifelong thing and it changes and morphs as you go through different stages throughout your life. But I so would have benefited from something like this. And so it fascinates me, the process. And it also fascinates me how terrified people are when they hear about something like this. And so I kind of want to demystify it a bit and take some of the stigma out of it and really look at, you can either suffer for many, 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 many years and have this affect relationship after relationship after relationship in your life over a long period of time, or you can go and do something that accelerates you getting through this pain. And in my book, I would want to do something to accelerate getting through it because it's so painful. So I want to turn this over to you, Keith, and just kind of tell us why you love, this process, and then, let's talk about why this is such an important journey for people to really evaluate doing for themselves.
Okay. I love doing it because of what you're saying. I can see results take place pretty quickly. When things start to happen pretty quick. It still may take some time certainly nobody's going to be totally recovered, healed after they leave after a 3 or 4 week stay in the day program. But it really sets them on a good start and on a good path. And the reason that it works is because the way we're set up, we have groups, we have different groups. We have education groups, we have a Christian living group, we have an education group where people learn about the things that they're dealing with that come from abuse. They learn about depression, they learn about how their emotions work, they learn about a big issue that we deal with there with a lot of abuse issues is shame. We spend a lot of time on looking at shame, toxic shame, and how destructive it is. And so the best way to heal shame is to expose it. And the best way to do that is in a group setting. And so because there's lots of validation and empathy that's shown, and that's been proven to help people resolve the shame issues that's connected to the abuse that they grow up with. And it's also known that group therapy is the most effective form of therapy that there is. If you were to, you could Google the phrase 11 curative factors, and you would see why. All these different factors that were, I believe Irvin Yalom, Paul, is that the guy that's responsible for those? Yeah, he came up with these 11 curative factors, and these factors are things, dynamics that we all experience as human beings. And in group therapy, all of those 11 factors are at work, whereas in individual therapy, there may be just 2 or 3 of them. So group is the most effective way to deal with these things, and it works very, very effectively.
And the process group, explain what the process group is, Keith. That's and some of the things, you probably ought to confess some of the things you do in there. But
yeah, I was just going to say, how about for the people that are absolutely terrified of, they're already terrified and feel shame and they don't want to talk about it, and then you say, well, you're going to sit in a group and talk about it. How do you help people get past that abject? I remember feeling like I can't let this out. It'll never stop. It'll consume me. And then I had a group therapy session, and I ripped an anatomically correct doll to shreds and hit it with a batanga or bataka. I don't remember what they're called. And that was like 12 years of therapy in that one group therapy session. So yeah, how do you get people to kind of overcome that?
Well, and that's common. People come in and they're afraid, or they're intimidated, or they've just seen Dr. Meier and they come in there and they're real anxious about being in group. And so one of the first things that we do is I have everybody go around and introduce themselves to that new person and tell them a little bit about what they're doing there. And more often than not, after they hear that, they start to relax a little bit, and we don't ask them to share their full story on when they introduce themselves to us, just a little brief part of it. And so they kind of warm up to it, and it doesn't take but a couple of days.
Okay.
They're affirmed by other people, and they find out that other people have experienced some of the same things that they're experiencing, and that makes it a little bit easier to move into.
So how about what Paul just asked, the process group? Explain what that is.
Well, so the process group is, that's just group therapy. There's different kinds of groups. There's education groups where basically we teach people things, and the process group is an interactive group where everybody gets to interact. There's specific rules that the group goes by, and there's also crosstalk in a therapy group, whereas if you were like in a self-help group, like a Celebrate Recovery group, Celebrate Recovery, or some other group where it's more of a there is no crosstalk in those groups, but these are therapy groups where people can give feedback about how they experience the person that's talking. And part of the rules is that you do it in a supportive way so that each person can really benefit from the feedback. Also in the group, we'll have them write letters, which is similar to the empty chair Paul was talking about. They'll write letters and to people.
So they're abusers,
their abusers.
Not letters that they mail, but once in a while we have them share it with somebody. But lots of times they write it just to get it expressed.
Yeah.
How about, someone is opened up like that, and maybe it's the first time ever in their life, and then they leave for the day to go, explain that process. They leave and they go to a hotel nearby. I would be terrified after that, feeling safe in that moment. And now I have to step out of the clinic and into the real world, even to get to my hotel.
Yeah. Yeah. I watch out for that. I've learned over the many years about that. And that's why on the first day, I have them only share just a brief amount, because I've had people come in there and, like you're saying, they share too much and then they don't come back the next day because
Right.
they leave and they go, oh, what did I just do? And they have too much shame to come back. So I try to just regulate that at first, just let them share a little bit, get some supportive feedback, and just hold them back if they start to share too much.
And then Grant, when you're coming in and you're, moderating and looking at medication, how much of that is being measured against the state that they're in emotionally?
That's a good question. That's definitely a process. I think, clearly their level of functioning, if they're wanting to do our day program, is they're usually not in a very good place. Mm-hmm. Clearly, so we always start with, try to do one medicine at a time, but sometimes we add multiple. But, I really rely a lot on, obviously, when I'm meeting with the patient every day, mental health is subjective, so I ask them kind of how their symptoms are. We're looking at, are we seeing improvement with anything that we have them on? Talk to about other symptoms they're having, just as simple as, are you sleeping? If you're not sleeping, okay, well, can we do something to help facilitate the sleep?
Right.
Sleep hygiene, medicines, anxiety attacks, people with social anxiety. And so then sharing in a group like that can be very overwhelming. Working through those things. And then, I rely on Dr. Cobern a lot and then the team of therapists to give me feedback as far as, I see the patient every day, but not for near the length of time that these therapists are seeing them. And so getting feedback, okay, patients coming in and saying, oh, yeah, things are great, things are fine. And then, find out, okay, this is the report I'm getting, and like, oh, no, things are not fine. Mm. The client's doing X, Y, Z in group, or they're not sharing, and so really I utilize and rely on Dr. Coburn's team a whole lot to help guide things, because they're with the patient and the client all day, and right. Really kind of get to see behavior and how they're, their self-talk, how they're talking and communicating with others, a lot of things.
Yeah, and Kristin, we once a week we for an hour or a little bit over an hour if we need to, we Keith and Grant and I and all the counselors meet together and go over each patient one at a time, and all share what we're learning about that client, and one of our psychologists does psychological testing on them, and she'll share the test results and what the computer is guessing is going on. So the therapist shares and Grant shares and we all share. I read my initial workup. So we all discuss that patient and figure out a game plan for that patient. We don't have just one way to do things and everybody's got like a square trying to fit in a hole, The way we treat each client is individualized depending on their personality and what their needs are and how open they are to insight. If somebody's fragile and they're close to so depressed that they might lose touch with reality, then we go real gentle with them. But if they're in there and we think they're ready, then we'll go whole hog and just dig and probe and get stuff out as quick as we can and get them to cry and share and pray and forgive and hit a punching bag if they need to, or do different things to bring about shortcuts. So we all meet together to figure out a game plan for each individual.
In addition to that meeting, we all sort of cross paths during the day. So maybe the clients had a session with their individual therapist, and I'll see that individual therapist before group, and they'll catch me up with what's going on. So we all keep up to date and keep communication like that going. I'll check with Grant in the morning about kind of the med rounds and what's going on and anything I need to know about medication. So we stay in pretty close touch during the day, as well as just that one meeting. That's an important meeting, but it's kind of ongoing throughout the week.
Yeah, it's very collaborative.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I know, medication, if that's part of it, is, being administered, and it may be very different from what they were first prescribed to what they end up leaving with, right, Grant?
Oh, yes, absolutely correct. I have a lot of clients that come in on medicines that we end up changing or on some things completely different, and that's what's so cool about the program and me getting to see them every single day is, these medicines don't, some of them are as needed and they work immediately, and that's awesome, and we can really start a new medicine and by the next day, hey, is this helping? But then a lot of them, they do take time to build up, but we can assess for immediate side effects, immediate tolerability that a lot of times we can't do on the outpatient level. We really encourage a lot of the genetic testing to make sure that we're genetically on the right medicine. But it's so cool to get to see a medical provider every day, I think, and to really get to work that closely with your medicines, and we can sometimes make quicker adjustments than we would on an outpatient level, because again, they're going to be seen the next day. So we know if there are any problems with it or if things are going great, and we keep going with meds like that. But go ahead.
An example is we can see anybody that's been having panic attacks for 30 straight years, and we can end them in about half an hour, where they won't have any more. But we'd have to load them up on so much, by loading them up on major tranquilizer or on some benzodiazepines or something. And Keith always says to Grant and me, he says, now don't get them so relaxed that they don't work on their problems. Give them enough so they're not in pain, but don't give them so much that they don't work on their problems. And the next day they just say, oh, I feel great, I don't need to work on my problems, And but depression, like Grant was saying, if somebody's depressed and you pick a good antidepressant for them, and then they feel about 25% better each week. So it takes about a month, and so they go home before it's even had a full effect. Or if we put them on something like Lamictal, which is my favorite medicine for anxiety, but it takes about 3 or 4 weeks. It takes about a month to get them up to a decent level. You got to climb real gradual, and so we will give them some medications that give them some immediate relief, but not so much that Keith gets mad at me. So
I think that's an important component that I always assess for, when we're talking. So, every morning we kind of do a little review of symptoms and okay, how's the depression? How's anxiety? How's PTSD stuff? How, panic attacks? Are you having
suicidal thoughts,
nightmares, suicidal thoughts, all of the normal things? But, when I know I'm meeting with a client that has a post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis, that the team is asking this patient to deal with a lot. And so just because there's some distress, that does not mean I make a medicine change. There's some of this, we don't use the term normal, but there is a level of quote unquote normal that anyone would experience when they're discussing these hard issues that on a day-to-day basis this person actively tries to avoid thinking about and talking about. And we're saying, hey, it's time to talk about it. And so I talk the patient through that as well as like, hey, this is stuff you just got to get out. I don't want to medicate this. I don't want to adjust anything right now. This is something you need to process and get through. And that's what's ultimately going to have you feeling better. And so, I'm not making a medicine change every day, but, we're just looking through immediate medical needs and, but then talking the patient through things with symptoms and kind of helping normalize where they are and saying, I'm working through some trauma from when I was a teenager that I haven't dealt with in 30 plus years.
Right.
And I'm distressed and I'm anxious, and walking them through, hey, you know what, that we're going to get through that. And that's going to be something that you're going to continue to work on. But where you're at is kind of normal for anybody that was working through that. And that can help just kind of normalize the process for them. Make them
I'm sure that can be
crazy. Exactly.
Yeah, that can be so validating, because when you have been stuffing those feelings down forever and you start actually feeling them, you think there is something very, very wrong until you're, you realize in a program like this, oh, those are just my feelings. I'm supposed to feel them.
Right.
They're not going to kill me. Yeah, exactly.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Interesting. So,
and then in group, they hear that, they think that they're the only ones. A lot of people that have deep hidden, buried secrets of, abuse or different things, think that they're the only one. Until if they get in group and they finally admit it, or things that they've done wrong, and they finally confess it and admit it, and then other people in the group say, "Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too." Then they don't feel like, oh, I'm not the only one in the world who's ever been through this. And it helps them to feel better about themselves and to let things out. Anxiety is a fear of finding out the truth about your own thoughts, feelings, and motives. So anxiety is a fear of finding out the truth about your own thoughts, feelings, and motives. And we've said before, Kristin, on our programs, that the majority of our thoughts, feelings, and motives we're not even aware of. They're unconscious.
right.
And in a group, those unconscious thoughts, feelings, motives, grudges, bitterness, fears come out. They come to the client's awareness. And when they do, and they cry about and share it with others, and people interact and all that, then the fear goes away. So you can cure anxiety through therapy. And so we just use enough medication so that they won't experience just horrible pain. Like if somebody's having a horrible panic attack, they think they're having a heart attack and want to go to the emergency room. Well, we don't let them, suffer something like that. But we will let them feel enough anxiety so that they will want to share and feel a lot better from sharing.
That's right.
Is family ever a part of this process?
We try to get them to include their family, and we'll often call the family if they say it's okay for us to call them, and we encourage them to let their family be involved. If they're not directly involved in the process, there's things that like letter writing. I mean, it might not be safe in some situations, but where it is, we certainly encourage the family to be involved. And sometimes if it's okay, we'll have them in for some sessions, a session or two during the process.
Right.
But hey, I wanted to share something here while Dr. Meier was talking. I found a tweet from a guy that I know named Paul Meier, and he says here, I'm going to quote you, Dr. Meier, okay?
Okay.
He says, no matter how severe anyone's anxiety is or how long they've had it, modern meds can make it disappear within minutes, but only the truth cures it.
Mm,
The truth sets you free.
absolutely.
In fact, there's the Bible verse that says that if the truth sets you free, you'll be free indeed.
Mm.
I know, no one likes commercials, but seriously, folks, without the help from these organizations, we could not stay on the air. Please give a shout out to zencharts.com. If you're a mental health or addiction treatment center, you'll want to use their EHR. It's gorgeous, and they're just good people. And also MyGenetics, MyGenetx.com, because knowing your genetic code empowers your mental health treatment. And lastly, CopeNotes.com. We love getting positive messages right to our phones every day from Johnny Crowder. He's the lead singer of Prison, a heavy metal band sharing their music about suicide prevention, addiction recovery, and mental health. See, that was painless. Support them as they support us. Back to the show.
So Paul, when you first opened Meier Clinics, and it was probably just a Meier Clinic, right?
Yeah.
So how did you move into the space of doing something like the Catalyst program?
Well, when we started back in the 1700s, when I was young, No, back in 1976, when we started, people could go in the hospital, and insurance would pay for it, and so they would, if people were suicidal or so depressed that they couldn't go to work or go to college, then they would go into the hospital, and we'd do all this sort of thing. And when people go to the hospital now, they don't get any of this stuff, but we would do all these group things and all those things that I learned at Duke and that different people learn different places, and people would get just amazingly better, but they'd stay 3 or 4 weeks in the hospital and then they'd go home. And then around the late 80s or 1990 or so, the insurance companies quit paying for that. And now if somebody's suicidal, they go into a hospital. We don't even do hospital work anymore, but we will. If somebody's threatening to kill themselves today, then they could go to a hospital or jail. They'd do about an equal amount of good. But they need to go somewhere where they can't do it, But they go in the hospital and they just load them up on medication. They don't do therapy on them. They don't do, they don't do any counseling at all. Usually, they just load them up on medication and send them out 4 days later, whether they're still suicidal or not. And so when the insurance companies dictated that that's all you could do, then we started the day program, about maybe 30 years ago or 35 years ago, to take the place of the hospitalization. And so then instead, people that live in the Dallas area stay in their homes at night, but they come 7 hours a day of these different kinds of groups. And I think, again, the process group is probably the most powerful because that's where they're sharing with each other for 90 straight minutes. But anyway, so all the things that we used to do in the hospital, we created a day hospital instead. And so people could still get the healing that they got in the hospital without being in a hospital. And so we call it the Catalyst program now, but it's a day hospital or a day program. And again, I used to do outpatient therapy, Kristin, where I'd see people once a week. And if somebody was real depressed and anxious, I'd usually see them between 9 months and a year. So it would take me 9 months to a year of doing the best therapy I could do to get them where they're really feeling great, feeling a lot better. And those very same people, those very same clients, if they would go in the day program for 3 weeks, they'd get as far in 3 weeks in the day program as I could get them doing my own therapy in 9 months to a year. And so it's just amazing. It's just so exciting to watch that happen. We had a pastor that came in there. He had a 7,000 member church in another state, and he got real depressed, and he did great while he was there. And on his last day, he was feeling wonderful, but on his last day, he came in my office and he was crying. And I said, what are you crying about? He said, I'm just overwhelmed with. He says, I've been a pastor for all this number of years, and we counsel, we do pastoral counseling with hundreds, even thousands of people over the years from our church. He said, I've never seen so many lives changed so quickly as I have in this day program. And he was just, he was weeping with joy over what he saw. And his church, sends people and helps pay their way through the day program, and it's just amazing what happens.
What's a minimum stay for the day program?
Is it 3 weeks, Keith? Or
I would say a minimum stay is 3 weeks. I always like to get them to stay the fourth week if they can, to just sort of solidify the work that they've done. It takes us about a week to do all of our initial assessments for all the clinicians to see them, and then us meet together for a team meeting and come up with sort of a treatment plan. And then by week 2, they're starting to really get into dealing with their issues and learning about what they have to do to make changes. And then the third week, they sort of get to a place where they're getting it. But if they can stay a fourth week, I'd always recommend that, just so they can really solidify it a little bit more.
Okay, so that I was thinking that too, that fourth week is helping sort of launch them out back into their world.
Yes.
So what is the aftercare, after that 4 weeks? If, let's say, it's someone that, is out of state, what's the protocol in that regard?
So the whole time I've been there, I've been trained that we start aftercare planning on the day that they arrive. So we start putting together resources for them. We find out some people live, not in a big city where there's a lot of counseling available, and those are a little bit more challenging. But we work with them. Sometimes they're returning to a counselor. Sometimes they'll find a different counselor and a different medical management person, doctor, psychiatrist. But we have appointments set up before they leave for them to go and return home and start seeing a counselor and start seeing a doctor. And all that's taken care of before they leave. It's a really important part of what we do because we don't want to just leave them, leave them hanging out there. They've got to have something to continue to follow up with.
I'd like to share a case study.
Absolutely.
Because I think maybe that's for all of our listening family right now. You're trying to, all of you in our listening family are trying to figure out, now, I wonder what this is, and I wonder what that's like, and I wonder what this like,
exactly.
And that's like. But I think by sharing a case study, maybe each of us can share one or something, but maybe that'll help people see what really happens. What came to mind is there's a patient, and she doesn't even, her name's Diana, and that's her real name because she's the one that she actually wrote her own story in one of my books and said I could use her as an example anytime I wanted to. So, but there's a gal named Diana who was extreme. She was extremely abused growing up. We won't go into all the details, but her mom and dad, were physically abusive and sexually abusive, and then parents divorced when she was young, and then her mom ran a little dingy motel, and they would make her and her sister do sexual things with customers that came and stayed at the motel. And it was just, one horrible experience after another. Right. And this gal, when she was in high school, one of her friends, somebody befriended her and brought her to their church youth group and things like that. And she got close to God, and she broke away from the family system. And even though she didn't get therapy, she did a lot of good. She didn't get therapy then, but she got a lot better. And she went off to college and graduated and became a teacher and married a wonderful man who was very kind to her, and had a couple of kids. And so here she was in her 30s, and she was happily married and going to church and nice kids and all that. And then a principal at the school she was teaching at made advances at her, and it brought back flashbacks. A lot of times people who were abused will sort of just be able to put it out of their minds for a while, but then when something happens, they have flashbacks, and it all comes back to them. And it all came back to her and just flooded her with pain. And so even though she had a nice husband and environment and all that sort of thing, she got extremely suicidal, and her family doctor started her on antidepressant. And but then she decided to kill herself and didn't tell anybody. And she got in her car and raced down the highway at 70 or 80 miles an hour toward a bridge abutment that she had already picked out. And she was going to crash into it and kill herself. And when she got right before that abutment, and she would have done it, and when she got right before the abutment, her brakes locked, and her car skidded, and she just barely missed it, went in the ditch, and crashed her car in the ditch. And I think she still totaled her car, but she lived. And when she crashed into the ditch, her car radio bounced on to a Christian song, out from the ashes, God will save you out from the ashes. And she thought, wow, God still wants me alive. He put the brake on my car, brought on this song. He still wants me alive. And she drove home, or didn't drive home. She called the police and called her husband, and her husband came and took her home. And she didn't tell him that it was a suicide attempt. She just told him the brakes locked and they had an accident. And her doctor didn't know that had happened. And as soon as she got home, the phone rang, and she answered it, and it was her doctor, a lady doctor, a female doctor, and calling her saying, Diana, you've been real depressed lately. And Diana lives I think it's Oregon that she lives in. But it was one of those states right up there, either Oregon or Washington. And her doctor said, I want you to go down to see Dr. Paul Meier in Dallas and stay in his day program, and I'm going to pay your bill.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that talk about a miracle. When a doctor calls you up says, I want you to go to the 3-week program, and I'm going to pay your bill.
Right.
That's pretty nice. And so she did, and she came down, and we treated her every day. And we did these different techniques, that we put the empty chair in front of her and had her. She had so many people to tell off, it took a lot of chairs and letters and all sorts of things and punching bags and she got it out. I mean, she did good hard work. She stayed about 3.5 weeks, and she did fantastic. And she went back home and ended up working for a nonprofit organization that helped abuse victims.
Oh, wow.
Instead of teaching, she did that. And then while she was doing that, she got a degree in counseling and, plugging away at it little by little and became a professional counselor, which she is today. So she ended up working her way up in that it's an international organization that helps abuse victims around the world. And she became one of the leaders of that and also became a counselor. And,
Wow.
And so, I think that's pretty cool story of what the day program can do.
Absolutely. Who wants to go next, gentlemen?
Dr. Cobern, I'll let you go. I know you've got some
Okay.
decades.
Okay. There's two that I'm thinking about, and I'll refer you to one of them. One of them is in that book that Paul and I wrote, that ebook, Meaning in Life. There's a letter in that book from a guy that came and stayed in our program, and it's one of the best, most powerful letters I've ever read. And so he gave me permission to include it in that book. So if you get that book, then you can read that. But the other one I'm thinking about, there was a lady that came several years ago after her husband had been in our day program, and they live in a different state, and she came down and spent some time there, and they were having pretty severe marital problems. They'd been married over 30 years, and he was abusive in the marriage. And she learned about, she was pretty, to use a phrase, she was struggling with like codependency, fragile, kind of needy, unable to really stand up for herself, didn't really understand anything about boundaries. And she came through the program and she learned about all that stuff, and she went home and started to just live healthier by using those things in her life. And of course that created more problems in her marriage. And she ended up separating from her husband and moving to this area. She was a teacher. She got a job substitute teaching at first, and then she went to aftercare outpatient groups to work on those issues. And I saw her off and on for about 2 years and watched her grow and become healthier and learn how to set boundaries. And she's struggling to make her marriage work and get them back together. And in fact, there came a time when he did move down here, and they started their life over here. And she's been able to be strong and maintain her movement towards being whole and healthy. And the marriage is still a struggle, but she's doing great. I'm really impressed with the way she's worked at it and the way she stayed with it, and just kind of where she is right now.
And I'm sure you get that feedback later. And is it always a surprise?
No. I've done this. Yeah, I've done it a long time. I sort of would be surprised if they, if they follow up, but if they don't follow through and get support around them when they leave and continue where they're going, then there's a good chance they will go back to what they were before. Right. But if they continue, it may change some other things in their lives, but they'll be healthier, they'll be more whole. That's what I expect to happen.
And we plan with them from the first day they come, like you said earlier. From the first day they come, we spend a little bit of time with them, or they do, the counselors do, getting them prepared to have a support system when they do get home. So we don't just do therapy on them while they're here. We do therapy on them, but we prepare them for the rest of their lives, for being in some sort of support group when they get home. It might be, card party group or something,
Right.
or different. It might just be having friends, but or a Celebrate Recovery group. Celebrate Recovery groups are all around America, and they're free and they're usually really good. So that's something that a lot of them do that they can afford to do.
Right. How about you, Grant?
Yeah, one of the stories that always stick with me, I think, since I've been working with Catalyst is there was a patient that had contacted our day hospital and we actually got to hear his testimony, this patient's testimony not too long ago at a little banquet that we had. But this patient was, I think from his story, he was moments away from ending his life when our intake coordinator called him to follow up about his inquiry about our day program. And we ended up bringing this patient in, and he had been going through a lot of marital difficulties, and this patient just ended up doing some really awesome work. A lot of the emotions and the feeling stuff was totally new to this client, and did some strong work in the program, and ended up, I think we found out several months later when he shared his testimony at this kind of banquet thing we had, that he had reconciled and they were working on the marriage and just being able to express himself appropriately, learning not stuff emotions and just not let rage and anger build. And it was just incredible story of what I think that the team in our Catalyst program was able to do to just really help change. You think about a family's life. What could have happened had he followed through with a suicide that
Right.
would have left children, fatherless, and just changed, his kids' lives. Just
Right.
our program being able to help this patient.
A lot of the clients that come will admit that they almost killed themselves. They almost did it right before they came, and we have, every few weeks, Chris. We've got a gal named Chris who talks to when a client calls us and says, I'm interested in your day program, and Chris starts talking to him, and even though she's not a professional therapist, she might as well be, because she's got such a heart of gold.
Yeah,
But she'll call them. She'll keep calling them and asking them, when are you going to come in? When are you going to come in? And I remember just not long ago, a month or 6 weeks ago, there was somebody that she called one more time. She'd called him about 4 or 5 different times and to chat with him about coming in. And he says, "Good thing you called." He said, "I was just had the gun in my head. I was just getting ready to pull the trigger when the phone call, when the phone rang, and I'm going to come in." And he came in and worked and got better. People, when you're in the middle of a depression, if the low serotonin and all the things that are going on, it feels like it's never going to go away. It's hard to convince people that it will. We need to give them a little hope. But when you're in it, it feels like it's never going to go away. So it's really hard for them to believe that they can get over it. And there was a study done, I think it's Oregon that has assisted suicides, which I'm totally against. And they got, for the study, they got like a dozen people that were arranging assisted suicides to agree to do, 6 months of therapy first. And when they did that, 85%, it was something like 85% of them decided against suicide. But see, it seems logical when you're in the middle of that kind of pain, to killing yourself seems logical. And people that do it wouldn't do it if they had a little bit of help, a little bit of medicine, some therapy, and anybody that's suicidal can get well if they'll go through the right steps.
And there's a lot of, they don't feel like they're worth being alive. There's that also. So how do you work with someone who, they show up, and yes, it's a great thing that they showed up, but maybe, their family has really pressured them or something like that, and they just don't even feel like they're worth being helped?
Keith, you tell them about that one.
Well, so I was thinking as you were talking about this, there's still, I hear often people come in and they will say, this place is my last hope. If I don't get better here, I am going to go kill myself. I hear that. and I try to find something that they have hope in. I mean, sometimes people say that, I won't kill myself because I believe it's a sin and God won't forgive me. I won't kill myself because of my kids. So I'm going to try to find, if they're that desperate, I'm going to try to find some way to get them something that they can have some little piece of hope about. Because if they're in a lot of pain and they have no hope, then I'm going to be really concerned about that. And I'm probably going to recommend that they go inpatient for a few days till they can get past that, and then come back and do more therapy and try to find some hope. And, when they're in the group and they hear other people share their stories of hope, oftentimes somebody's leaving on a day that someone new comes in, and then they share their story, how they were when they first came in, and now how much hope they have. That instills hope in the new person coming in.
If they do need to go inpatient, where are they going to do that? Because I know they're not doing it at the Richardson Clinic.
We send them
do we have a local hospital?
Hospitals nearby. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. See,
but they go in there. They go in for 4 days. They go in for 4 days and get medicated and sent back out. But that's still 4 days that they're locked up and can't kill themselves. So,
right.
It gives them a little bit of time to think.
Right. Gotcha. I know. I'm like the details. Who picks me up at the airport? What hotel am I? How far am I from the office? Those are the kind of things I would be asking someone. Interesting. Well, I'm glad that we did this, because I feel like you all are so obviously warm and care and love this. So it takes a lot of that fear about strangers that you're going to come in and share your deepest pain with. You all love doing this, and you want people to do well, so people can actually pick up the phone or email or call, and say,
and our therapists, therapists are so loving.
Yeah.
Our therapists are extremely loving. In fact, Dr. Cobern teaches graduate students. In fact, he's getting ready to go teach a lecture right now. He might have already left our conversation, but he teaches graduate students, and I always tell them, Keith, find the students that you get to know that are the most loving, that also have an A average, and so find the most loving people that you can find that are also smart, and have them come on and be interns. So we get the finest interns in the world, in my opinion, and then about half of them, we train them for a couple of years and teach them all these things that they couldn't learn if they went to Duke, PhD school or something. They couldn't learn it, and they learn all these things that we've been using for 40 years, and so they become excellent therapists. And about half of them will stay with our clinic, and the other ones will go on to do other jobs or be on a church staff or do different things that they want to do with their lives. And so we just got a very loving staff, and I'm so proud of them, and I love them, and I love being with them, and I love what I do. And I think our whole crew there, Grant Davis included, he's got a heart of gold. It's not just a job. It's a mission, and it's a mission and a calling, and we love each other and we love the clients.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that we did this. I know Dr. Cobern left, because I can see that he left because he does have to go teach, but I'm sure he's going to listen to this later. So thank you so much for coming on. Grant, thank you again for coming on as well and sharing the nights that you have with us when you could be having dinner, I'm sure, with family.
No, it's my pleasure. Absolutely.
And Paul, as always, what would we do without our Monday nights? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean this is our family get together for.
That's right.
Me and you and Melanie. I look forward to that. I'd look forward to it if it wasn't a podcast.
On the air, exactly.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.